Welcome to the Making of a Musical, i.e., how to create musical theater and make money doing it, by yours truly, Stephen Gashler. So, the first question I want to ask is, aren't musicals cheesy, freaky, painful, and less than masculine? Of course. But a good musical can also be inspiring, spectacular, fun, terribly catchy, and brilliant. Quality musical theater is a combination of virtually every art form: literature, acting, music, dance, fashion, visual arts, magic, and sometimes even cinema, to name a few. If there is a more grand, rich, and powerful art form, I'm not aware of it. Movies are great and glorious, but live theater has the added benefit of the real time, real world human touch, which not only makes the experience more fun for the audience, but for the actors as well. And the good news is, it's never been easier to make such grand, rich, and powerful art. The tools have never been more accessible, there's never been more inspiration to build on, and there's never been more opportunity to perform and to make money doing it. Whether you're a Charlie Chaplin or a Mel Brooks wanting to write, direct, compose, and star in your own productions, or if you're a team player looking to collaborate, you, by virtue of living in the 21st century, are fully equipped to turn your dreams into a full-scale production. While big studios have always and may always dominate the industry, there are theater spaces everywhere, and you are surrounded by talented and willing people and a wealth of potential audiences with a bottomless appetite for fresh entertainment. If you don't believe me, ask yourself how many hours of Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, or YouTube you and your friends consumed last week. Entertainment has never been higher in demand. For those of us in theater, it's just a matter of selling the benefits of live entertainment over pre-recorded entertainment, which should be a no-brainer. Furthermore, when you consider the costs of most startup businesses, research, development, loans, and lots of capital, compared to the low overhead of theater, you got a space, you got actors, you got a show. With a little business sense, theater may be one of the easiest businesses to break into. In other words, you have the power, not some studio executive or Broadway producer, you. Many believe that they are beholden to the whims of the industry, that the most they could hope for is to write a great script and pitch it to someone with influence. For years, I believed this myself, and after sending out countless submissions to contests, theater companies, agents, and publishers, and receiving countless rejections, I began to believe that it was just too hard to break in. Perhaps, I reasoned, if I were to move to New York City or Los Angeles, I might rub shoulders with the right people who could get me an in. The problem is, countless other people believe this as well. In the fight to win the attention of the powers that be, one wages an uphill battle wherein casualties will be the rule, success the extreme exceptions. How many call center workers, table bussers, and taxi drivers in Los Angeles or New York City are also writers, composers, and actors by night, waging everything on a lucky break? And how many of them are wasting away with disillusion and missed opportunities? Even worse, how many of them, in the desperation to realize some portion of their deflating dreams, are selling out, taking whatever gig they can get, no matter how unfulfilling or degrading? Don't do that. The grass is not greener on the other side, and New York City and Los Angeles are not the promised lands. Instead of competing with everyone else and pursuing some distant, elusive, and remote possibility, think differently and plant where you are. Seize the opportunities right in front of you, and if you don't see them, make them. Specifically, I want each and every one of you to think of yourself as a producer, the person who brings your dream to life, unbeholden to anyone else. You are fully capable of learning and executing the simple business principles that will make this possible. There could be no greater ambassador of your passion project than you, and the fact that you don't have to subtract royalties from your earnings makes you more likely to succeed. Forget about the authority of others and work as if everything depends on you and you alone. From my experience, there is no surer way to make your dreams a reality and to enjoy financial success while doing so. To illustrate, I'll first relate my own story of how I've turned musical theater into my day job, right here in Utah Valley, outlining my successes and failures and the lessons learned from both. I'll then share some practical tips, the tools of the trade, the business of entertainment, and how to walk away with a profit. Given the limits of the presentation, I will only lightly touch the subjects of finding inspiration in the crafts of writing and composing. Between middle school and high school, while my peers were into sports stars, pop singers, and teen idols, my friends and I were into bums. Not the kind you sit on. Like the barefoot, carefree Huckleberry Finn, we saw the early American hobo as the archetype of freedom, the polar opposite from the boring, serious businessman we feared was the specter of our future. During sleepovers, we would practice sleeping in gutters or newspaper bins. We would go barefoot, speak in broken English, and dare each other to eat the trashiest things we could find. One time, my buddy and I went so far as to take a bus to downtown Salt Lake City, where we hung out with the homeless for a night and slept on a park bench. To me, a satirist from the beginning, it was all a kind of joke against societal norms, while at the same time, an inspiring adventure, appealing in its uncouth and forbidden nature. In my mind, these impressions naturally took the form of music. Jazz music. One summer day, I had the idea to take the characters, themes, and songs we'd invented while playing out these adventures and turn it all into a musical. I imagined a hilarious and inspiring show featuring singing, dancing bums on Broadway. So I opened up a word processor and started writing a script and lyrics. While I had no idea what I was doing, I also had no reason to doubt myself, so it all just flowed out of my mind, melodies and all. I then got to work on the score, teaching myself how to use the free music software of the late 90s. It turns out, when you're unaware of your limitations, they don't exist. Over time, I shared my passion project with others, gaining excitement and momentum. Then, during a lunch period of my junior year, we put on the first production of Bums the Musical, which I also directed and starred in. It was a train wreck, but the audience liked it enough, and I learned what I was capable of. My senior year, I was back with a slightly bigger, slightly better show, Midgets the Musical. We won't talk about that one. Over the next 9 years, life happened, including college, a mission, marriage, and introduction into the workforce and other passion projects. In 2010, after the publication of my first novel, The Bent Sword, a satirical young adult fantasy adventure, I was ready to revisit the stage. So I took my story and turned it into a full-length musical. At the time, I and my wife Teresa were with a nonprofit theater company which began as a bunch of BYU students wanting to develop new original plays. I shared my script and music demos with them and was amazed when they told me they would help me put on the show. I thought I had, at last, arrived at fame and glory. While the company covered the rent for the theater, my wife and I put up audition notices at BYU, emailed our friends, and to our wonder, people actually showed up to audition. Everyone who came was cast, and these people invited their friends and family to the show. At the time, it was a magical experience. In hindsight, it was also a train wreck, though it was significantly less of a train wreck than my high school productions. The theater company said that it was the most successful production they'd ever put on. Not until it was over and I handed over all of our profits to the theater company did it occur to me that I could have just rented the theater myself and kept the profits. Between self-employment, day jobs, babies, writing books, and other passion projects, it took me 5 years until I was ready to put on another show. But with the success of The Bent Sword still fresh in my memory, I was confident that I could do it again without the permission of anyone else. So I contacted a theater company, or a theater owner, paid him a few thousand up front, enough to rent some rehearsals and 11 performances, and made plans for my revised and expanded edition of Bums the Musical. Wanting great branding, I hired an artist to make this swanky cover, which I used in posters, websites, and social media. I had learned from The Bent Sword that the key to successful production was involving lots of people. So rather than my wife and I doing the majority of the work, we found a director who helped us find a choreographer, a costumer, a set builder, etc. The wonderful thing about this valley is there is so much talent and so many people willing to donate their time for the love of art. Of course, if you're an actor thinking your talent should be your day job, this is a bad thing. But for producers like me, it's great. While we covered all the expenses, the only person we actually paid was the set builder, and only then at our own insistence, knowing the many hours of hard work he put in. It's not that we wouldn't love to pay everyone, it's just the nature of the community theater. Everyone knows it's a labor of love. Though for us, community theater was just a stepping stone toward professional theater. As for this production, notwithstanding all the donated time, we took a loss. While the reviewers had some great things to say, I had tried to scale too quickly, and we didn't get enough audience to adequately fill all of the performances. I know I said theater should be easy to break into, but as with all business startups, the reality is that creating a new theater company is tough, and the vast majority don't survive. In fact, the theater owner was also struggling to pay the bills. For one of the performances, the electricity was shut off, and we had to send everyone home. That was fun. Like the characters of our show, it seemed we were destined for hardship with no relief in sight. But also like the characters, we were determined to sing and dance about it. Meanwhile, Teresa also had a passion project, a paranormal romantic comedy with haunting bluegrass music, inspired by a scary story she had told at the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival. She and I developed this musical together. Collaborating with a close friend or spouse can be amazing, or terrible. We experienced both. My advice is be sensitive and over-communicate, especially when there's deadlines, especially when you share the same bed. Take My Death Away began as a staged reading at the Provo Library. Hint, they let you use their conference rooms for free for things like this. We weren't trying to make money, we just wanted a reason to develop the show, get feedback, and test it in front of an audience. Because after the mixed results of the 2015 production of Bums, we wanted to play it safe. In hindsight, it was harder to fill an audience for a free show than a paid show. Free has a stench about it. Always charge for tickets. And when not paying your cast, at least take them to Denny's. This is a requirement. Unfortunately, this guy, whom Teresa and I affectionately call Mr. Moneybags, wasn't in the audience, and we received no invitations to take our budding Halloween show to Broadway. Within months, I moved on to my next project, so that Nordic rock opera that had been floating around in the back of my mind. The fact that I knew little about Vikings and less about rock music was no more of an impediment to my journey than my ignorance of bluegrass had been with Take My Death Away or my ignorance of jazz music with Bums. I've found that competence follows innovation, and not the other way around. This rocking artwork came out of a contest I held on 99designs.com, a site I highly recommend for creators on a budget. Following a challenge by a friend, before I'd even composed half of the album, I got on the phone and pre-sold as many albums as I could. It was really awkward, and to be honest, I don't really recommend doing that. At the same time, it forced me to put this project into motion. I also organized a Kickstarter project and a launch party at the Provo Library featuring local bands. Altogether, this enabled me to sell hundreds of albums. The first concert took place at the Velour in Provo, a popular spot in the local music scene. It's not that expensive to rent the place, and we made our money back from the ticket sales. Then my family took a minified version of the show to libraries. Performances like these are easier to set up than you might think. You just got to get on the phone. Teresa and I even performed the show at LTUE. Each performance gave us an opportunity to improve the show, sell albums, and grow our following. We were also growing a following on YouTube where we posted music videos from this and our other shows. But as the Valhalla wave died down, and once again Mr. Moneybags failed to make an appearance, I found myself saying once again, well, that was fun. Time to get back to work. Then in 2019, a former director of Bums told me that he was starting his own nonprofit theater company dedicated to new works in the community, and he asked Teresa and I to join the board. He put us in charge of scheduling the season, and you can be sure that one of our first shows was a full-scale production of Valhalla, including a live band. Incidentally, Teresa makes a hot Viking Jarl. Once again, she and I produced and starred in our show, and at the time, it was the biggest, baddest show we'd put on. The ticket sales putting Bums to shame. Then, once again, we handed over the profits to the theater company and went back to our day jobs. I'll never get tired of seeing my show's title on a marquee. It seems that our passion for our works made the company successful, because when, a few months later, the company put their profits into a classic Molière play, nothing against Molière, but the ticket sales were pitiful. In the fall of 2020, the company was scheduled to put on the first full-scale production of our play, Take My Death Away. This artwork also came from a contest I set up on 99designs.com. But somehow people got it into their heads that there was some sort of pandemic going on, and the company canceled the entire season. This was a blow, as we'd been looking toward this show for years. However, A month and a half before the show was originally scheduled to open, the theater owner, separate from the theater company, which rented the space, he contacted me and offered to personally fund the show if we would still put it on. He'd been happy with how Valhalla had turned out and wanted more of our content. Like countless other business owners, he was desperate to stay afloat during the financial crisis of the pandemic. So, with some research, we found out that as long as we got creative, we could still technically put on the show while observing all of the state's safety guidelines. Still, we were wary of the righteous indignation of the social media mobs that had attacked other theater companies for not shutting down. If someone in our group were to get COVID 19, never mind that they could have got it from virtually anywhere else, it could ruin our investment. Still, we accepted the challenge, though the question remained, would anyone support us? The answer was a resounding yes. Though we only had 6 weeks to throw the whole thing together, a dizzying pace for a full-length musical, we soon assembled a passionate group of people who were bored out of their minds from the pandemic and eager for a chance to perform again. This same phenomenon applied to the audiences. Even while everyone had to wear a mask, we more than doubled our sales from Valhalla, selling out more than half of our performances. To my knowledge, none of the hundreds of people who attended our play got sick from doing so. The lesson: sometimes you got to go against the grain, and for every challenge, there is a greater opportunity. While many were still uncomfortable attending live events, this challenge also proved to be an opportunity. We had the show professionally recorded, and we then sold virtual tickets on top of the live tickets. This significantly increased our revenue, something we would not have thought of if we didn't have to innovate. And technically speaking, it was a simple process. We simply uploaded the video to YouTube, made it private, and shared a link with people who bought tickets. Where there is a will, there is a way. In spite of the theater owner's offer, we chose to fund the show ourselves, and we split the earnings with him. What more, we paid every person in the production, something we'd never done before. And thus was born our own theater company, Great Hall Theatrical Experiences. Having had enough of do-gooding nonprofits, we were a strictly for-profit company dedicated to producing our own works. There were no boards, no committees, and no solicitations for donations or grants. Teresa and I would be beholden to no one but ourselves, retaining absolute and creative financial control. Perhaps surprisingly, this insistence has not hampered any relationships. People want to be a part of what we're doing because we're actually doing it. It's fun and inspiring, and unlike most community theaters around here, we pay them. It's pittance, but it's money nonetheless. And with each production, we try to pay more than before. Our goal is not to get filthy rich, but to support our own family and as many other families as we can in doing what we love. In no time, we spun up a website using WordPress and its e-commerce plugin, and soon we were taking lots and lots of ticket sales, the money going straight to our bank account. For years, I didn't believe that theater could be our primary source of income. I subscribed to the Mike Rowe philosophy of get a real job and do your passion on the side. There is a lot of truth in that. My many years of real jobness, plus some real estate investment, equipped us with the financial savings we needed to transition into self-employment. My experience with business prepared me for the business of theater. Plunging into this without a financial safety net and a strong business plan would have been stupid. The middle path I found is when you can make your passion a good business pursuit, something you could explain to your uncreative accountant friend, and instead of him saying, "Get a job, hippie," he says, "That actually makes sense." With a constantly growing network of crew, performers, and audience, and a large, predictable stream of revenue, how could this not become our day job? Furthermore, Teresa enrolled in an entrepreneurship course for women called Soul Seed Academy, providing valuable mentorship for us as we kicked Great Hall into motion and planned our futures. I highly recommend them. As we've gotten more organized, Teresa handles most of the business and communications, while I mostly handle the creative side. Part of our business plan was to keep ourselves ridiculously busy with musical theater. While each show could bring in thousands, an average family needs tens of thousands per year to stay afloat. Thus, we required a new show every few months. Before one show wraps up, auditions would need to already be underway for the next one. So late last year, I planned out an entire year's worth of events, including youth workshops, murder mystery dinners, a dance, a mini Renaissance fair, and 2 musicals that don't even exist yet. This doesn't even factor in our additional projects such as creating albums and music videos. Some might call this crazy. And yet, so far, everything has gone exactly to plan. There is tremendous power in simply planning out one's future, not as some pie in the sky, wouldn't it be great if, but with real practical goals and real strategies for achieving them. If you can plan it, you can achieve it. There is no question in my mind that I am up to the task of creating, delivering, and producing two new musicals this year, on top of everything else I'm doing. Nor is there any question within the minds of our directors who have lined up to claim these musicals. Your task is to prove to others that you can be depended on to deliver quality. In summary, through 10 years of trial and error, we realized the following. One, anyone can create musicals. Teresa and I are just average people who put in a lot of time and figure things out, and we still have a long ways to go. Two, get lots of feedback. We workshop everything we do, no matter how many times we've workshopped it before. We ask every cast for their thoughts, and we try to be humble as we incorporate changes. Our works are never finished, as they're constantly evolving and improving. Some of the most valuable feedback has been from reviewers who tear our shows apart, so don't be prima donnas. Three, you don't need anyone's permission. Whether or not Mr. Moneybags even exists should have no influence in your ability to achieve your dreams. Similarly, four, you don't need anyone's financial support. For just a few $1,000s, we knew that we could fund any show, and as long as we were smart with that money, we could make much more in return. If you don't have that kind of money, that's not a problem. You can start by building a savings. There is power, security, and freedom in being financially independent. And it really doesn't take much to get started. In fact, it may not require anything. There are many spaces where you can perform for free, and most people don't expect compensation for being a part of theater. You can always prove a prototype before you invest. Along those lines, don't try to scale too quickly. Over the years, I've seen many a theater company rise and fall as their visions exceeded market realities. To avoid this, test the waters and proceed with caution as you underpromise and overdeliver. If this all feels overwhelming and beyond your abilities, that's fine, because from my experience, as I said, competence follows innovation. To quote Ray Bradbury, all my life, I've jumped off the cliff and built my wings. It works every single time. It never fails. Truer words were never spoken. You don't need expensive tools or expensive training. You don't need to be an authority or an expert to have a golden idea. You can start whenever you're ready. Hint, you'll never be ready. So just start now, or you may never start. Over time, you will hone your craft and discover your unique voice, gifts, and abilities. As you grow, you will figure out the complexities of the business, one leap of faith at a time. When it comes to idea generation, I've found that there's usually an image, concept, if not a story, somewhere in the back of my mind, which I can expand into an outline and then into a script. The good news is that plays, mainly consisting of dialogue, are way easier to write than novels. Of course, lyrics are a different story. When I compose, sometimes I start with a long walk or a brainstorm on the piano. Other times I just open a MIDI sequencer and start throwing together notes. I've found that there are seldom bad ideas, and often the most golden ideas are intuitive, little thoughts on the tip of my mind that can be explored and expanded into something greater, if you'll just give them a chance. For me, literature and music go hand in hand, inspiring one another. Whatever works for you, make it a daily habit. Many of my songs began as songs about my children. When I'm feeling lighthearted and playful, I'm often in the zone to extemporize melodies and lyrics, sometimes without even thinking about it. My advice, if you want to be a composer, have lots of babies. You never know when a great melody will come to you, and having one and then losing it is downright frustrating. So when they do come to you, make sure to record them or to write them down as soon as possible. I use a recording app on my phone for this. One of the most important steps is obtaining feedback. Theater, especially musical theater, is inherently social. It's essential that you get out of your shell and let other people interpret, perform, and critique your work. Schedule a stage reading, even if it's just over Zoom. By being accountable to other people, you'll be amazed at what you're capable of producing. If you don't deliver in full, at least you'll have more to show for yourself than you would have otherwise. If you can't handle the critiques of your friends, you're definitely not ready for audiences and reviewers. When you get started, think minimalism. You don't need a fancy set or fancy costumes. If you have a good script, good music, and good performers, you can raise money from nothing. Call it a benefit concert if you want, but if you find yourself trapped thinking, if only I could afford this, you're probably not thinking creatively enough. Everyone can afford a budget of zero. Thinking around a budget will force you to become resourceful and industrious, and as you grow, you'll be stronger because of it. If you prefer live instruments, many musicals require nothing more than a piano or a guitar. If you're able to make a pilot a financial success with simple instrumentation, great. You can then figure out how to take things to the next level when you get there. One important question is, should you start a nonprofit? Many theater companies choose to become nonprofits so that they can obtain public grants, be exempt from taxes, and because it's good for PR. However, there are some cons. The process of obtaining nonprofit status is long and difficult. You may lose creative control to a required board of directors. Your potential gains are limited as you'll be required to take a limited salary instead of your complete gains. Writing and pursuing grants proposals is time consuming and competitive. The few $1,000s you obtain may not be worth the time of investment when compared to how you might have spent that time in a for profit pursuit. And grants, of course, have strings attached. You have to prove to the grant boards that you're using the money how they want you to, which may not coincide with your vision. So, unless you have a specific nonprofit strategy, I recommend you suck it up, pay sales tax, think commercially, and retain full control. Again, when you have a can do attitude, you can generate your own money. When you're dealing with other people's money, that sense of resourceful industry tends to vanish. For example, I know of a city sponsored theater company that recently spent over $7,000 of public money on costumes. If this were an epic period piece dazzling with spectacle and bringing in large audiences, I could understand that. But this was just an average production of a common play. Meanwhile, we usually spend less than a tenth of that, if not much less, for about as many actors. By simply asking around, shopping at thrift stores, and throwing in some imagination, you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish on a shoestring budget. The jobs of musical theater. At bare minimum, you can do all the jobs yourself. But again, I found that the more people I include, the more money I make. So to me, it's worth it to build a team and to give each member at least a small stipend or honorarium. As it's common to receive nothing, a few $100s can go a long way in building rapport. Ideally, some of the jobs and crew members you'll want are an artistic director, aka the head honcho. If you love your baby, give it to someone else, as a fresh perspective will breathe new life into it. Also, if you direct yourself, that will significantly limit your ability to oversee the business aspects of your production. And if the business isn't sound, there is no show. An assistant director, helping with scheduling, lines, and the day to day tasks. The assistant director also often doubles as a stage manager, overseeing the smooth running of the show once it's begun. You'll want a music director, helping everyone come together in beautiful harmony, a dance choreographer. Unless you really know what you're doing, you don't want to do this yourself. Choreography is essential to a good show. Similarly, a fight choreography is often indispensable. A costumer, a set designer, a technical director overseeing the lights, music, cues, and any special effects. Often you'll need a dedicated audio engineer to oversee microphones, run the soundboard, and operate the sound cues. The good news is most theaters that you can rent have this stuff for you if you're not technically minded. You want spotlight operators if necessary. A committed marketing specialist would be great, as if there's no butts in seats, there's no show. Of course, this is only a sampling of the many jobs your show could require. My advice is start with a small team and see if adding to it, if adding to it, being conservative in your compensation at first, doesn't add to your overall profits. Chances are you have friends or family that would be just as excited to help to bring your dream to life, whether or not you pay them. Now for some more practical advice. When I write a musical, I usually start with an outline. Any word processor will do. I know there's all sorts of great software out there for creating. I just use LibreOffice because it's free and it doesn't get in my way. Then I write a script. I use Writer Solo which is also free and has a lot of great features, such as stage play formatting. Never get creative with your formatting. If you want to be seen as a professional, you've got to follow industry standards, and for this, script writing software is essential, as using a standard word processor will suck hours of your life with unnecessary manual formatting. Again, keep the creativity in your story, not the formatting. As I write lyrics, I leverage rhymezone.com, which has all sorts of great tools for helping you find rhymes, near rhymes, synonyms, idioms, etc. My music software of choice is Cubase. Unfortunately, Cubase is far from free, though as my livelihood depends on it, for me, it's well worth the investment. It provides everything I need for composing, recording, mixing, mastering, and music notation at a truly professional level. If you're a student, you can get a significantly discounted license. There are many other great opportunities, or there are many great other options out there, such as Logic, Pro Tools, Finale, or more consumer-end options such as GarageBand. If you're just looking for a free recording software, Audacity is the most popular. If you're just looking for free music notation software, MuseScore is the most popular. Waveform Free claims to be a fully featured, completely free digital audio workstation supporting MIDI sequencing. It looks promising, though I haven't tried it. As for me, it's all about high-end MIDI, and my most important tool is my sound library. Many people, including other composers, have asked me how I record my instruments. The truth is, I seldom record instruments. I use the East-West Quantum Leap sample libraries, which includes millions of high-quality sounds requiring terabytes of storage. For example, not only is there multiple recordings for every note a violin can play, including the up bow, the down bow, pianissimo, mezzo forte, and fortissimo, but there's a recording for each articulation of each of these notes, such as legato, staccato, pizzicato, tremolo, etc. Compound this with every instrument and chorus of instruments you can imagine, and the possibilities are endless. And this is just one of many libraries out there. If you're getting started with composing, I recommend you seek out a free sample library, as I did, then upgrade when you're ready to move on. While live instruments are nice, they're not strictly necessary these days. In this day and age, this is the way most music is produced, both in theater and in film. Whether or not to include instruments in a production should be a stylistic choice, not a necessity, as the simple reality is that instrumentalists are less willing to perform for free than actors are. Most of my work looks like this: simple drawings, simply drawing out the pitch, time, articulation, and intensity of notes for one instrument after another. The music library is what makes it sound awesome. The MIDI is then automatically converted to sheet music, which I share with my cast and crew. When it's time to record, I invite performers into my bedroom studio. It's as podunk as it sounds. And I mix audio tracks with the MIDI tracks. A full production requires hundreds of files, such as project files, karaoke tracks, demo tracks, cast recordings, sheet music, scripts, and revisions upon revisions. I use Dropbox to synchronize all these files with the casts and crews, so that as soon as I update a document or export an audio track, they have access to it. And when you're investing so much in intellectual property, you sure better have backups. We use a new instance of Slack to communicate for each production. It's more focused and manageable than email or a Facebook group. We use Google Drive to create and share audition forms, agreement forms, rehearsal schedules, etc. As part of planning out your show, you'll need a venue. As I already mentioned, there are free locations such as parks, though you should call the city before to confirm and reserve, or even someone's backyard. Most schools have decent auditoriums, some have amazing auditoriums. Again, most libraries have spaces dedicated for free community usage, which could be great for something low-key like a stage reading. And some have theaters that can be rented. Off the top of my head, I can think of a handful of clubs and private theaters around this valley. There's probably more than you think. Don't be discouraged by rent prices. If you plan well, you should make much more in return. The first step is you just need to look around and get on the phone. As the author Tim Ferriss put it, a person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have. I would add, a person's success in life can also be measured by the number of audacious plans he or she is willing to make. Again, we're not talking dreams, but concrete plans in the not too distant future, which you are fully committed to execute. But before you schedule your performances, you need to figure out your business plan. Don't be intimidated, it's easy and well worth it, as it will illuminate your future. I recommend opening a spreadsheet and listing all the important variables you can think of, such as how many people can I realistically cast? When we're just getting started, we found that we could at least scrounge together about 10 to 15 committed people who are wanting to be a part of a show. So let's plan on 12 cast members plus you and two friends running the production, totaling 15. Then ask yourself, how many audience members can an average will an average each participant bring into the performance? From our experience, while some bring in 0 and others bring in like 40 or 50, the average is around 20. It's more than you might think. 15 caster crew times 20 audience members equals 300 total audience members. How many seats are available at the venue? Let's say there's 100. You can now calculate how many performances you should book. 300. Audience members divided by 100 seats equals 3 performances. How much are you comfortable charging for tickets? If you're just getting started and it's a low-end production, you can start small, but don't sell yourself short. I recommend having more extensive tickets while offering significant discounts to referrals from cast members. For example, regular tickets could be $15 while friends and family will buy them at $10. Or maybe you give everyone an early bird special, incentivizing them to buy soon. The psychology of saving will ironically make people more comfortable spending more. So on average, let's assume tickets are $12. You can now calculate your revenue. $300 or 300 audience members times 12 tickets equals $3,600. So how much does the venue cost? Let's say it's $200 per night. So with 3 performances, that will total $600. How much will the rest of your production cost? Let's assume costume, props, marketing, miscellaneous expenses, and a cast trip to Denny's add up to $1,000, bringing your total expenses to $1,600. You can now calculate your bottom line, subtracting the expenses from the revenue to get $2,000 profit. This is without factoring in concessions, merchandise, premium tickets, or season tickets, which could significantly increase your profits. It's also without factoring in ticket sales from other sources. Another way of forecasting would be to use these same numbers to estimate how much revenue on average each member of your cast and crew brings in. 20 audience members per cast or crew member times 12 tickets equals $240. So if you recruit 10 people, you're looking at a revenue of $2,400. If you could recruit 30 people, which admittedly is hard to do, you would be looking at a revenue of $7,200. Hence, from my experience, successful casting is the most important step in marketing your show and the biggest predictor of its financial success. I've done plenty of experiments with Google Ads, Facebook, and email marketing, posters, flyers, etc. But at least for an emerging theater company, nothing is nearly as effective as word-of-mouth marketing through your cast and crew. We incentivize our cast and crew members with gift cards to restaurants when they help bring in a certain number of tickets. That said, no one likes pushy sales managers, so don't overdo that. And may the gods of musical theater clear the way before you, and may you find the meat of poetry within you. It's easy for me to talk the talk. If you want to see me walking the walk, I hope you'll come to our 2021 production of Bums at the Angelus Theater in Spanish Fork. This will be our best production to date, and lots of fun. As I recommended to you, tickets are currently $5 off when you reserve them online before March 1st at bumsthemusical.com. I'd love to meet you in person after the show and answer any questions. Also, feel free to send me an email or check out my website, or you can check out my YouTube channel. And thanks for watching. That's all, folks.
Hello. Did you want to answer questions for a Q&A? We have a couple.
Yeah, let's go ahead with some questions.
Okay, so the first one is, what comes first for you, the story or the music?
That's a good question. I'd say it's probably different for everybody. For me, it's mix and match. Sometimes I have melodies long before I put them into a story. Occasionally I write lyrics and then I write the music to that. And frequently I just write the music as I schedule it in. So I often do begin with a story or my wife begins with the story and she hands it off to me, and we think, okay, there needs to be a song here, and then I just sit down and I compose a song. And other times, we're writing the story and we think, oh yeah, there's this melody from long ago. I wonder if I could use that, and I factor it in. So all of the above.
Okay, and the second one is, do you see the effects of the pandemic changing live theater permanently? If so, will it be for better or worse?
I don't really see it as permanent. I think there is an end in sight. Of course, I'm not the most qualified to predict or prophesy on this matter, so I would look at the charts for a better prediction. All I can say is, for my experience and my theater company, it's been a major blessing, as I said, because it's forced us to innovate. And again, we wouldn't have thought of selling virtual tickets. And it's an opportunity that's much bigger than the pandemic, because even when people will be comfortable coming into theaters again in droves, what we found is so many people, especially around here with all the universities, they have family and friends in other states who want to see their shows but can't. And so suddenly, leveraging YouTube and the internet, it's a totally different story. Community theater is now national theater. So that's really cool. And it's something we're glad that came out of this pandemic.